And now I'm going to take you to the advanced settings on the backup plan. So here there are some more advanced settings that applies to almost each kind of backup plan, no matter of kind of data we are backing up. But of course, some of them applies, for example, only to the file or drive image level. If we are talking about data encryption, as the user and as the customer, you have the control over the encryption level. So just to be exact, you are choosing the encryption key length. And of course, you have to remember, once the key gets longer, the encryption is stronger, but also utilize more resources from the end user computers. Sometimes we get a question from our customers, how much our agent will affect their computer's efficiency. And usually for most of the computers we meet nowadays, it's almost transparent. So the encryption process usually is handled by the CPU or another design TPM or stuff like this. So usually it works pretty well with the encryption, but you have to also keep in mind that with the highest level of the encryption, with 256-bit key length, you won't be able to run your drive image as iSCSI target, which is option of data restores. And about the encryption keys, as I said during the slide, during the presentation, the encryption keys are created based on the password phrase you can provide in Xopero 1, and this password phrase is kept in the secure password manager. So the encryption key is sent to the agent only for a backup time. It's not stored on the data store, but in the management service, so no one except customer is able to access his data. Then we've got compression settings. The compression is enabled for each backup by default. There are two different compression algorithms, LZ4 or Z standard. So you have the control over the algorithm which is used. By default, it's Z standard. LZ4 could be useful for drive image backups, for example. And then we have to choose the compression level, so how well your data are compressed. Once the compression level gets higher, the data, of course, takes less space, but also during the backup, the agent may utilize some more resources. Another setting is error handling. Here, you have to define how errors are handled. For example, you can run overdue backups. Overdue backups is a backup task that has not been started on the scheduled time. So for example, I'm scheduling the backup for 8 a.m., but I get late to the job and I'm 8:50, for example. So with these settings, when I will turn on my computer and it will get connected to the management service, automatically the backup task will be started. Otherwise, I will have to wait to another day to 8 a.m. to start the backup up on the scheduler. There is also the setting which tells our agent to repeat backup in case the task fails. So for example, it applies to the situation when we are sending some data to the storage and we lost connection to the network. So totally there won't be a network connection. So then our agent will await provided time interval around 1 minute and try to send the data again. And with this setting, it will be done 3 times before the task will fail completely. So these settings will help you to make your backup successfully in case where you can meet some network issues, for example, some connectivity problems, some problems with accessing to the data store. We can also ignore bad sectors. These settings can be useful, for example, when customer is aware that he has a lot of bad sectors or some bad sectors on his drive, but he has to do its backup in order to, for example, restore this drive image to another place. So in order to not produce so many warnings during the backup And to complete this backup successfully, you can just ignore bad sectors. In case when our agent during the drive image backup will meet the bad sector, it will be replaced by 0 and start in this form. This setting, based on my experience, is also very useful when there is used software from checkpoint company to encrypt the drives. I don't remember the exact name of the software, but I remember that every 64,000 block on the drive, it logs this block, which makes it impossible to read by our agent. And in this case, you have to ignore those bad sectors, otherwise you will have a lot of warnings that are some kind of false warnings because we've got all your data, but we were not able to access to some checkpoint data. So that's based on our experience. There are also VSS settings. What do you have to know? Each backup which is made from Windows operating system on the file or drive image level uses VSS feature. VSS, which is volume shadow service, volume shadow copy service, is used to create the shadow copy of your data. So once the backup is triggered, we make the snapshot of the data from the user's computer to keep them consistent. We are sure that all data in backup, all files, comes from exactly the same time. They are not modified during the backup because they are protected by the snapshot. And that's the way we are dealing with Windows backups. Moreover, in the case there are some applications that supports VSS writers, like for example Microsoft SQL database, such application is also requested to write all its data directly to the storage because the Windows operating system is preparing for the snapshot to be made. And once the Microsoft SQL Server, for example, stores its data, it sends the information back to the shadow copy service that, okay, all data are on a disk, database is in consistent state, and you can make the snapshot. So there are two different ways to deal with Microsoft SQL database, but more recommended is to make dump directly from the database instead of relying on the drive image backup and VSS service. But in case of any VSS errors, you can decide that you want to continue after the VSS error occurs. For example, we are making backup of some static files and we agree that if VSS service fails or we won't be able to create snapshot, we want to continue our backup. And now we've got a backup script. There are three different kinds of backup scripts available in Xopero 1. You can use these backup scripts with any kind of backup available in Xopero 1. So you can use them with drive image backup, with file level backup, as well as with, let's say, VMware or Microsoft. Those scripts are triggered on the computer where our agent is running on. So for example, if you will use some scripts with VMware backup, then the script will be running on the feature worker, not on the virtual machines, and that's what you have to keep in mind. There are pre-backup scripts that are made before any data will be prepared for the backup, before VSS snapshot will be started. In general, this is the first operation in the backup process to trigger the pre-backup script. The post-snapshot script applies to Windows operating system especially. It triggers after the VSS snapshot is created. And the last one is post-backup script. This is the script which is triggered as the last task during the backup. And with pre-backup script, we provide few kinds of predefined backup scripts. So you don't need to create all those scripts on your own, but of course you can by providing the path to the script, for example. There are three different predefined scripts. The first one is to shut down the computers, and of course it should be used as the postscript because we met quite often the situation when the customer wants to make backup at the end of the workday. So the best way is to ask his coworkers to not shut down computers on their own, but they will be turned off by the backup. We are scheduling the backup 10-15 minutes after workday is finished, and once the backup is completed with the script, the computer will be turned off. And this is one of the best ways to deal with such case. Then we've got two different scripts to separate database engines. The first one allows you to backup Microsoft SQL databases. Using this script, you can protect unlimited number of Microsoft SQL databases. You can point that you are going, for example, to protect entire Microsoft SQL instance. And this script, triggered as a pre-backup script, firstly will produce the database dump, so you can be sure that database is consistent. And after that, we will back up this database dump. Of course, we have to point for file level backup, for example. We have to be sure that directory used to Microsoft SQL dump is also selected to be baked up. And in pretty similar way, we can deal with MySQL backups. And later, I can send you details about the scripts and arguments taken by those scripts. Once you choose the script you want to trigger, you can also wait for the script to continue the task. And of course, in case when script is used to prepare some data from backup, we must wait for this script to be completed. Otherwise, we won't know that the data were prepared for the backup or not yet, and the backup has been started before. And you can also set the waiting interval for such scripts. So for example, if after 10 minutes the agent won't get the information that the script gets completed, we can continue the task, or we can fail the task if the script fails. Once we check this checkbox, of course, it's also recommended for each script which is used to prepare the data for the backup. Then we've got post-snapshot script. The configuration of each kind of script is almost exactly the same, but for example, post-snapshot script you can use especially in case when you need to protect some databases or data that comes from other applications which doesn't support VSS service and cannot be backed up on live. So for example, let's assume it's some file level databases, because usually we can meet such case with file level database. We can use the pre-backup script to stop this database. So once the database engine is stopped, all data there are consistent. And with post snapshot script, we can start again this database engine. And between those two scripts, there will be VSS snapshot done. So we can be sure that all those files of this file level database are consistent and are kept in our backup exactly in the same state as they were once we stopped our backup, our database with this prescript. I hope I didn't make it so complicated, but in general, we don't need with this script to wait for entire backup to be completed until we will be able to run our file level database again, but we can start this backup literally seconds or minutes after we've started our backup and when VSS snapshot is completed. And about the post scripts, I think I've said enough. They are triggered as the last task in a backup process. Usually they are used, for example, to shut down the computer. And the last advanced settings is bandwidth limit. So we can reduce the bandwidth if we don't want to overload our network, if we don't want to utilize entire bandwidth by the backup task. We can reduce the bandwidth utilization during the backup. And that's all advanced settings. As I said, they all apply to almost each kind of backup supported by Xopero 1, except VSS settings because they apply to file and drive image backup. That's all about the advanced settings. Then I'm going to talk a little bit more about drive image backup.